next speaker is an author and journalist, a frequent contributor to Downbeat, Bill Milkowski.
Hi. I'd like to provide some historical perspective on some of the great jazz ambassadors over time. The music we call jazz has been circulating the globe for 100 years now. Today, musicians from all over the world have learned that language and have put their own unique spin on it, creating an ever-expanding vocabulary for this century-old music. But let's go back 100 years to early 1918. As World War I was drawing to an end, Lieutenant James Reese, Europe's Jazzy Hellfighters military band, began performing concerts for British, French, and American military audiences, as well as introducing French citizens to the Hellfighters' syncopated sound, a kind of bridge between ragtime and jazz. Another early jazz ambassador, New Orleans clarinetist and soprano sax ace Sidney Bechet, brought his hot jazz sound to the United Kingdom in 1919 as a featured soloist with Will Cook's Southern Syncopated Orchestra at concerts in London, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. 6 years later, when Josephine Baker became the talk of Paris in La Revue Negre, Bechet was a part of that show. The same year, 1925, Philadelphia-born pianist and bandleader Sam Wooding performed the music of Duke Ellington in Berlin, followed by engagements in Russia, Hungary, Italy, Spain, Belgium, Scandinavia, and Turkey. Clearly, jazz, that great American export, was on the march globally. Louis Armstrong, perhaps jazz's greatest and most charismatic ambassador, toured England for the first time in 1932 and returned to Europe the following summer for concerts in London, Scandinavia, Holland, Belgium, Paris, Italy, and Switzerland. Duke Ellington would make his first European tour in 1933, playing his anthemic "It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swang" throughout the United Kingdom. The following year, trumpeter Buck Clayton, later of the Count Basie Orchestra, took his Gentlemen of Harlem abroad for an extended engagement in Shanghai, China. By the mid-30s, there were thriving jazz scenes in Denmark, Belgium, England, France, and Scandinavia. From 1955 on, Louis Armstrong traveled the world as a goodwill ambassador, spreading jazz from country to country. His popularity among soldiers and civilians on both sides of the Berlin Wall was legendary. Armstrong recalled in an interview that during a 1955 concert in West Berlin, fans slipped over the Iron Curtain to hear him play. 10 years later, Louis would perform a historic 2-hour concert in East Berlin, which was also broadcast on German television. Then in 1956, in an engagement arranged by journalist Edward R. Murrow for his popular CBS television show, See It Now, Armstrong and his All-Stars played 2 concerts in Ghana. 100,000 people showed up to see Pops play a free afternoon concert at the old Polo Ground in Accra on May 23rd. The following evening, he appeared at a ticketed event in a program entitled Satchmo at the Opera, enthralling the crowd with his rendition of Black and Blue. That same year, 1956, Dizzy Gillespie's Big Band was chosen to be the first jazz group sent abroad on a State Department-sponsored tour of Iran, Pakistan, Syria, Lebanon, Yugoslavia, Turkey, and Greece. Dizzy's tour was a great success and provided the blueprint for future State Department-sponsored tours by the likes of Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington, and Dave Brubeck, who in 1958 told his audience in Warsaw, "No dictatorship can tolerate jazz. It is the first sign of a return to freedom." A little side note, this Friday on PBS, they're airing a new documentary on that historic 1958 tour that Dave Brubeck did. So I would recommend that you all check it out this Friday. Since the late 90s, there has been a steady stream of young Israeli jazz musicians coming to New York City. Some like clarinetist Anat Cohen, bassist Avishai Cohen, guitarist Gilad Hexelman, who is playing right now as we sit here. He's in St. Petersburg, Russia, as part of the International Jazz Day ceremony there. These young musicians have climbed to a place of prominence on the scene in New York. American saxophonist, educator Arnie Lawrence played a crucial role in turning some of them on to jazz. Since moving to Israel in 1997 and founding the International Center for Creative Music in Jerusalem. He honestly believed the idea of peace through music, said his son, Eric Lawrence, himself a fine saxophonist who has been on the New York scene for more than 20 years. At his Jerusalem club, Arnie's Jazz Underground, the late Lawrence mentored a generation of aspiring players. As Andrew Gilbert pointed out in his Jazz Time story in Arnie Lawrence, it took a Jew from New York to bring jazz's spiritual power to the Holy Land. Another musician who believed in that idea of peace through music was the late saxophonist, composer, bandleader Bob Belden. In 2015, Belden traveled with his band Animation to Tehran to perform a concert, the first American musician to play in Iran since the country's revolution in 1979. Our trip is a manifestation of Herbie Hancock's dream of music bringing cultures together in peace, he told Jazz Times. I like to call it music diplomacy. Belden died 3 months after that historic concert in Iran. I wish he were still around. We could certainly use some good old-fashioned music diplomacy right about now. Thank you.